Above the steaming jungles of Borneo, a flash of silver carved through the clouds. Two roaring engines drove a plane that looked more like a predator than a machine, the P-38 Lightning. At its controls sat a quiet Midwestern boy who never seemed built for war. Major Richard Ira Bong, soft-spoken, polite, almost shy, was about to make the sky itself fear him. He banked left, sunlight glinting across the twin booms of his aircraft. Below, black dots rose from the canopy, Japanese fighters clawing for altitude. Bong tilted his nose downward, eyes fixed through the gun sight, breathing slow and steady. When his thumb pressed the trigger, 4 50-caliber guns and a 20mm cannon spat fire. A Zero disintegrated instantly, spiraling toward the jungle in flames. 2 more followed before anyone could even shout a warning. When Bong leveled out, the sky behind him burned with falling wreckage. That was how he fought. Swift, surgical, emotionless. To his men, he was simply Dick, the farm kid who flew like lightning itself. To the Japanese, he was something else. A ghost that appeared without warning and vanished before they could react. Richard Bong's story didn't begin in combat. It began on a dairy farm in Poplar, Wisconsin. He was the eldest of 9 children, a boy who fixed tractors, chased cows, and dreamed about airplanes he'd only seen in newspapers. His first cockpit wasn't metal and glass. It was the driver's seat of a beat-up truck. When the war began, he volunteered immediately. He wasn't loud, wasn't reckless, and didn't look like a killer. But the moment instructors saw him fly, they noticed something different. He had an instinct you couldn't teach. Perfect depth perception, lightning-fast hands, and nerves that never cracked. At flight school in Arizona, Bong was brilliant and a troublemaker. He pulled illegal low-altitude rolls over San Francisco just to impress girls. When the Army caught him, he should have been grounded for good. But General George Kenny, a commander who knew talent when he saw it, intervened. "He's reckless," Kenny said, "but he's the best natural pilot I've ever seen." Instead of punishing him, the general sent Bong to train harder and to watch. That decision would change the Pacific War. By 1942, Bong joined the 49th Fighter Group in New Guinea. He had never fought in combat. The Japanese, meanwhile, were veterans of China, the Philippines, and the Pacific Islands. They flew the legendary A6M-0, an aircraft so nimble it could turn inside any American fighter. But Bong had something the Japanese didn't, a machine built for a new kind of warfare. The P-38 Lightning looked alien. 2 long booms, 2 engines, 1 cockpit suspended between them like a dagger. It was faster, climbed higher, and carried more firepower than anything in the Pacific. 4 machine guns and a cannon mounted in the nose meant all bullets converged on one deadly point. And Bong, the farm boy who used to aim rocks at fence posts for fun, had perfect aim. He studied the Lightning the way a mechanic studies an engine. He learned its strengths, speed, altitude, concentrated fire, and its deadly weakness, compressibility, the invisible wall of air that could lock the controls in a high-speed dive. Many pilots died learning those lessons. Bong memorized every number, every limit, until the P-38 felt like an extension of his body. His first combat mission came over the jungles of Buna. Japanese bombers were heading for Allied troops. Bong and his squadron climbed to meet them. He didn't dive straight in, he waited. Watched how the bombers moved, how their escorts turned. Then, when the formation opened for a split second, he struck. He didn't turn with them. He refused to dogfight. Instead, he attacked from above, fired a 2-second burst and pulled away. 3 seconds of shooting, 3 kills. From then on, his method was clear. Never fight fair, never waste a bullet, never show fear. His fellow pilots joked that Bong could shoot the wings off a fly. In truth, it was his patience that made him lethal. While others sprayed ammunition wildly, Bong fired short, precise bursts. Every time he squeezed the trigger, something died. By mid-1943, his legend was spreading across the Pacific. He painted a name on his plane, Marge, after his girlfriend back home. Japanese pilots soon learned to dread that word written beneath the cockpit. His reputation grew with every mission. A bomber downed over Leh, a Zero shredded over the Huon Gulf, another 2 near Salamaua. Each victory marked not by celebration, but by a quiet entry in his logbook. No bragging, no boasting, just the cold numbers of survival. He was still that Wisconsin farm kid, polite, smiling, and uncomfortable with fame. When a new pilot asked how he made so many kills, Bong shrugged. "I just fly close," he said softly, "so close I can see the rivets on their wings." By the end of 1943, Richard Bong had become a living myth. He'd downed 21 enemy aircraft, received the Distinguished Service Cross, and been sent home for a war bond tour. America loved him, the humble kid who turned into a hero. But Bong hated the spotlight. He didn't want speeches or parades. He wanted the cockpit. Within months, he begged to return to the Pacific. "Sir," he told Kenny, "I'm no good at selling bonds." "Let me go back and fight," Kenny agreed reluctantly. Because for Bong, flying wasn't about glory. It was about mastery. Each dogfight was an equation, a puzzle to be solved at 400 miles an hour. When he returned to combat in 1944, the Pacific had changed. Japan's pilots were dying faster than they could be replaced. But Bong didn't underestimate them. He respected them, and that respect made him even more dangerous. The P-38 Lightning had evolved too. New engines, better controls, stronger firepower. It was now the deadliest weapon in the Pacific, and in Bong's hands, almost unstoppable. He led bomber escorts, intercept missions, and ground attacks. He taught younger pilots how to live through their first battle. And every time he flew, he refined his impossible trick, a secret of timing, patience, and precision that would make him unbeatable. While others dived wildly or panicked under fire, Bong waited for that perfect instant, the moment when angles, light, and speed aligned. Then he'd fire a 1-second burst, no longer, and roll away before debris could hit him. That tiny window between hesitation and chaos was where Richard Ira Bong lived, and where 40 Japanese planes would die. When Richard Bong returned to the Pacific, he wasn't just another ace. He was a living legend flying a machine built for one thing: domination. But legends aren't made in safety. They're made when you face the impossible and refuse to flinch. Each morning the tropical sun rose over New Guinea like a furnace. Steam lifted from the jungle, and the air smelled of oil, sweat, and fear. Bong strapped into his Lightning, slid his hand over the throttle, and launched himself into the endless blue. He wasn't reckless. He was patient, calculated, cold. His flight leader once said, "Bong flies like a sniper. Every move, every bullet counts." That patience became his secret weapon. He didn't chase, he waited. He studied the sky the way a hunter studies wind. While others charged in screaming, Bong stalked his prey in silence until his moment came. The Japanese Zeros were lighter, faster at low speed, and deadly in a turn. They danced through the sky like acrobats. The P-38, by comparison, was a steel hammer, but Bong found a way to turn that hammer into a scalpel. His impossible trick wasn't about raw aggression. It was about geometry. He learned to calculate deflection angles in his head, predicting exactly where the enemy would be half a second later. While most pilots fired at what they saw, Bong fired at where the plane would arrive. His bullets and his instincts met at the same point in space. When his bursts hit, they didn't just damage. They erased. No wasted rounds. No second chances. He'd climb high above the enemy formation, using altitude as energy. Then, in one smooth motion, he'd dive, level off behind his target, and squeeze off a burst shorter than a blink. A puff of flame. A spiral of smoke. Then he'd climb again, invisible before the others even reacted. Over and over, the same rhythm. Attack, disappear, attack again. Not dogfighting, hunting. In July 1943, he flew a mission over Leh. 8 Japanese bombers, escorted by 6 Zeros, heading straight for Allied troops. Bong led a section of P-38s into the sunlight above them. The others prepared to dive. Bong waited. He saw it. A gap in the formation, a flicker of shadow where the bombers spread out for their run. That was his window. He pushed the throttles forward. The engines screamed, and the lightning dove. He fired one burst. The lead bomber exploded. Before the others could scatter, Bong cut through them like a blade, shredding 2 more Zeros that tried to intercept him. When he returned to base, he said nothing. He just noted 3 kills in his logbook. His squadron joked that he fought like he was born in the cockpit. But Bong always smiled and said, "I just farm the sky, one harvest at a time." His aircraft, Marge, became a legend of its own. A silver machine with his girlfriend's name painted beneath the cockpit. The only softness in a world made of fire. Ground crews treated that plane like holy relic. They said if Bong flew it, the Japanese wouldn't. General George Kenney saw it too. He sent Bong home again, this time to sell war bonds, to smile for cameras, to be a hero. But Bong hated it. The crowds, the handshakes, the endless speeches. He didn't want fame. He wanted control, the kind you only find in a roaring engine and endless sky. He begged to go back. "Sir," he told Kenney, "I don't fight for medals. I fight because someone has to keep the bombers safe." Kenney hesitated, then agreed. One condition, Bong would fly only high-priority missions. No unnecessary risks. But Bong knew there's no such thing as a safe mission in war. Back in New Guinea, 1944, Bong led bomber escorts through clouds so thick they looked solid. He kept his formation tight, his radio calm. Every pilot behind him trusted his voice more than their instruments. He would spot the enemy before radar did. When Japanese fighters rose from the jungle, Bong maneuvered his squadron between the sun and the enemy, always using light as his shield. His voice over the radio was steady. "Stay high. Don't turn with them. Make your first pass count." And it did. Every mission, more wreckage. Every week, more kills. By spring, he had surpassed Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record. 26 confirmed victories. The newspapers back home called him America's Ace of Aces. Bong didn't read them. He was too busy preparing for the next sortie. The Japanese called him the Two-Tailed Devil. His silhouette haunted their skies. Sometimes they'd flee the moment they spotted those twin booms glinting in the sun. But Bong never celebrated his victories. He never cheered when a Zero went down. He only whispered a quiet sorry, a habit that unnerved his crew chief. Maybe it was his farm boy heart, or maybe it was the cost of understanding exactly what it meant to win. Each time he climbed out of the cockpit, he'd touch the name Marge on the fuselage and walk away alone. By the middle of 1944, Bong had 28 confirmed kills. Every pilot in the Pacific knew his name. Every commander wanted him on their missions. And yet, he still trained younger flyers like a teacher. "Don't chase," he told them. "Wait for them to make the mistake. Then make it count." When one rookie asked what his trick really was, Bong just smiled. "There's no trick, just patience. That's what kills." But there was a trick, and it wasn't patience alone. It was the way he used energy, speed, and space. He never fought the plane. He flowed with it. He could feel the drag through his fingertips, sense the airflow across the wings, and know exactly when to roll, when to climb, when to strike. While others were reacting, Bong was predicting. And that half-second difference made him untouchable. He began leading Rhino flights, bomber escort missions over enemy oil refineries and supply lines. The Japanese threw everything they had at him. Dozens of fighters, heavy flak, suicide dives. It didn't matter. In one mission, his left engine took a direct hit. Fire alarms screamed, smoke filled the cockpit, and fuel leaked across the wing. Any other pilot would have bailed out. Bong just feathered the prop, shut off the fuel line, and fought on one engine, half power, still taking kills. When he finally landed, the mechanics were speechless. The plane was shredded. Bong stepped out, helmet under his arm, and said, "She's still got some fight left." By the time he reached 40 victories, the brass had had enough. General Kenney grounded him permanently. He'd become too valuable to lose. But Bong didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a pilot who hadn't yet finished his war. He never believed in luck, only in preparation. And when asked how he survived so many missions, his answer was simple. "Because I never stopped learning." That was the truth of Richard Bong's impossible trick. It wasn't magic. It was discipline. The kind of cold, relentless patience that turns fear into focus and chaos into control. When the order came to ground him, Richard Bong didn't argue. He simply nodded, saluted, and walked away from the flight line. The war still raged, but for him the sky had fallen silent. He had flown more than 200 combat missions, destroyed 40 enemy aircraft, and survived what no one should have. Now his commanders feared the one thing he never did, losing him. Back home, he was called America's Ace of Aces. Newspapers printed his face beside victory counts. He shook hands, smiled for cameras, and told stories he didn't care to remember. When people asked how it felt to shoot down 40 planes, he'd say quietly, "I was doing my job. I was lucky, but luck had little to do with it." Bong's skill was mechanical precision wrapped in calm. Still, behind every headline was a young man haunted by the memory of those who didn't return. He'd sit on his porch in Wisconsin watching birds trace circles in the summer sky and whisper, "They're free now. That's how it should be." Peace didn't suit him for long. By 1945, jet engines were rewriting aviation. Lockheed engineers were testing the new P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. They needed the best hands they could find. So Major Richard Bong, the farm boy who once fixed tractors, became a test pilot at Lockheed's airfield in Burbank, California. The jet was unlike anything he'd flown. No propellers, just the scream of pure thrust. It climbed like a rocket, handled like nothing on Earth. He studied every detail of the new technology, taking careful notes on power surges, control sensitivity, and fuel flow. To the engineers, Bong was more than a hero. He was the perfect instrument, precise, disciplined, fearless. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Bong prepared for another acceptance flight. He kissed his wife, Marge, the same woman whose name had been painted on his wartime plane, and promised dinner that evening. Then he walked to the shimmering silver jet waiting on the runway. He had no idea that the world would change forever that same day. The takeoff was smooth. At 300 feet, a warning light blinked red, fuel pump pressure dropping. Bong throttled back, radioed the tower, tried the backup system. Nothing. The engine coughed, flamed out. At that altitude, there was no margin for error. He pulled the canopy lever, tried to eject, but there wasn't time. The P-80 struck the ground just beyond the airfield and exploded in a white-orange flash. America's greatest pilot died instantly. He was 24 years old. A few hours later, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The world woke to nuclear fire, and Bong's death appeared only in the small columns of the next day's papers. History turned its page without noticing that one of its finest aviators had vanished on the same day the war itself began to end. In Wisconsin, the news hit like a silent crash. The townsfolk who'd watched him grow up could hardly believe it. His parents received telegrams from generals, letters from fellow pilots, and condolences from the president. But all they wanted was their boy back. The boy who fixed fences, who smiled shyly when he talked about flying, who promised he'd return. General Kenny, the man who once called him reckless, wrote later, "He made precision look easy. He turned discipline into instinct. There will never be another like him." At the base in the Pacific, his old squadron held a small memorial. They lined up their P-38s, engines roaring one last salute. As they climbed and peeled away, one slot in the formation stayed empty. That space, they said, belonged to Bong. Years passed. The jungles of New Guinea swallowed the wrecks of war. The rusted skeletons of Japanese fighters lay buried beneath vines and rain. But Bong's record, 40 confirmed victories, remained untouched. No American pilot before or since has surpassed it, and none ever will. Modern air combat is fought with missiles and radar, not eyesight and reflexes. There will never again be a man who hunts the sky by hand and wins. Richard Bong's time was the last age of human flight, when courage and calculation decided survival. Visitors today can stand inside the Richard I Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin. There, under quiet lights, sits a restored P-38 Lightning with the name Marge painted beneath the cockpit. Beside it, Bong's medals, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Bronze Star, and his logbook, its pages filled with terse, careful handwriting. Enemy aircraft destroyed. 3. No casualties. Mission complete. No bravado. No anger, just facts. That's how he lived. That's how he flew. When people talk about heroes, they often imagine men who love war. Bong never did. He loved flying. The silence before a dive, the hum of engines, the feel of the sky balancing on his wings. He fought because he had to, and he became a legend because he never let pride or fear guide his hands. His impossible trick was never really impossible. It was patience. It was discipline. It was the mind of a farm boy who saw flying as another kind of work, measured, steady, exact. He once told a journalist, "A good farmer and a good pilot aren't so different. Both learn the rhythm of the world around them. Both know when to wait and when to act." That was Richard Bong, the farm boy who learned the rhythm of the sky and turned it into victory. Today, when historians speak of the greats, Galland, Hartmann, Maguire, one name still carries quiet weight. Major Richard Ira Bong, the man who made war look effortless, yet never forgot its cost. The man who fought 40 battles in the clouds and returned home with humility instead of pride. His story isn't just about planes or numbers. It's about discipline over chaos, patience over panic, skill over rage, a reminder that greatness is not born from noise or fame, but from focus, the ability to see clearly when the world is falling apart around you. Richard Bong never lived to see peace. But because of men like him, peace came sooner. The skies he once fought in are now crossed by jets and airliners, calm and blue. And somewhere, maybe, the spirit of a farm boy from Wisconsin still flies through those clouds, steady hand on the throttle, watching over a world that finally learned to look up in peace.